Hey, this is Nate Wells.
And this is Drew Cove.
Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
Welcome to Giles and the Goalie Podcast, the only safe haven for you this week, free of political ads.
Wait, could we offer that up? Could we throw it out there? Be like, do you want political ads on a podcast?
I mean, everyone has a price.
There's got to be money in that.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably too late now,
I
but
didn't think about that.
next election, maybe.
Here's something we'll still be around in 2 years.
Yeah, if we're still here. If we're still, kicking around.
We'll do it next year for city council elections and
there you go. We'll focus more on the local aspect of it.
PTA elections, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there you go. There's room for everyone aboard the Giles and the Goalie podcast. Just small fees. Nothing too extravagant. Let's go. No political ads here. I am your host, Giles Farrell, who gets as far away from those on the television as possible. Next to me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Who has been on an extended Twitter hiatus until the politics of Twitter cease on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Or maybe shortly thereafter.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I see the ads everywhere as it is, but just cutting back on a little bit of that, and then people on Twitter, they like to get political, so I like to avoid the political, so I'll be back after Election Day.
The mute button is wonderful.
Yeah, and I've done a fair amount of that, but there's some people where it's I really do want to see their tweets, especially hockey folks, where it's this guy has really good hockey takes, and I want to see what he says about things. I don't want to see what he says about politics, so that's where I take time off.
All right. Well, before we wade too much deeper into the political waters, we can probably try to get after it here. The Minnesota Wild had another short week.
Yeah.
And it just drives me up a tree that, especially, again, from a recording standpoint, that we have to kind of dig for some topics, because when the Wild don't play, you're, not necessarily going to have plenty of topics to go on, but
they did play 3 games, right?
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
they played them right at the beginning. It
just feels like
they played one, and then they had an extended layoff. And
it just feels like they didn't. But yeah,
Thomas
Grice's mask is just terrific. We're watching an encore presentation on NHL Network right now.
Sorry, we've got NHL Network on, and Thomas Greiss has a completely wonderful goalie mask for the Islanders that has the Gortman's Fisherman on it.
It's tremendous.
But to review the week for the Minnesota Wild, they did have 3 games, first 2 of which came Monday, Tuesday, back-to-back in Vancouver and Edmonton. In the Vancouver game, Minnesota Wild lose 5-2 to the Vancouver Canucks, an old Northwest Divisional clash.
Yeah.
As I threw out in our game preview, we remember the Vancouver Canucks as once the Wild's greatest rival in the National Hockey League. But that was now many moons ago.
Yeah.
Wild burned by Marcus Granlund, Jake Virtanen, Elias Pettersson, Pettersson, and Ben Hutton, as they give up a 5 spot to the Young and Gun Canucks, losing 5-2 at Rogers Arena. Also, I pointed this out. Why is every arena and stadium in Canada either Rogers or Scotiabank?
It's like Target locally.
Bring back General Motors place.
Right.
Like the Pengrowth Saddle Dome.
Yeah.
What was, I forget, Skyreach Center.
Rexall Center.
Yeah. What was the Blue Jays stadium called before? What it is
Air
now?
Canada?
No, that was Toronto Maple Leafs. Air Canada Center. Now it's Scotiabank Center.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Molson. Was it Molson?
No. I don't think
I'm just throwing out
Molson.
Canadian beers now. I don't remember, but
I mean, yeah, you're bound to hit it if you just
just
keep
throwing enough beers.
tossing out
Labatt's.
Labatt. Yeah, Labatt Center.
But to that game on Monday, I know I did a kind of a whimsical recap that night on Facebook Live because we were all very tired, for those of us who stayed up to watch that game. Not that it was a particularly boring game. I don't think it was a bad game to watch, actually. And to that point, I don't think it was a terrible game played by the Wild. I feel like they had chances and they certainly had opportunities to kind of stay in that game and to eventually win that game. But wasn't Dubnyk's sharpest night either, but I don't think he played poorly. I think that the goals that he let in were at least moderately earned. And I felt like they, even though the Canucks are, I don't want to say they're a dumpster fire, but they're not a good team by any stretch. But they've got some young talent, Pettersson especially. I mean, he's become the darling of not Wild Twitter, of hockey Twitter, NHL Twitter in general. He's become the next big thing. So I wasn't super disenfranchised with that win. Like, I didn't think that win meant, the sky is falling, the streak is over, oh my God, they're going to lose. It's all coming crashing down around us, even though Dubnyk wasn't super sharp. I didn't get that feeling from that game. Did you?
No, it was just an unfortunate way to lose their 6-game winning streak.
Sure.
But they quickly got back at it the next night in Edmonton. And by the way, I was looking for Skydome was the Toronto Blue Jays.
Right, Skydome.
Home stadium name before it became Rogers again. But
remember when two people had sex in the hotel? So there's a hotel that's part of like that stadium, and then there was a famous moment where there was people having they were pressed up against the glass during a baseball game, which is just tremendous.
It's 6.5 minutes in, and we're way off the rails.
That's fine.
But the next night, the Minnesota Wild were in Edmonton at what do they call it now? It's Rogers Place.
Well, they got to mix it up between Vancouver and Edmonton, right?
Yes, Rogers Place.
Rogers Center, Rogers Place, Rogers Arena, Rogers Stadium. It's like Target Field, Target Center, Target. Surprised there wasn't Target Stadium. It said U.S. Bank slipped in there.
But the Wild come out as winners in this game, 4-3. Both teams traded a pair of goals in the first period. Both teams traded a goal in the first period. Then they traded a pair of goals in the second period, including a Connor McDavid goal in which he absolutely flew by Ryan Suter. Was not fair. But Eric Stahl with the power play goal equalizer late in the second period, and then Mikael Granlund late in the third with a power play goal to give the Minnesota Wild the lead and then the eventual win. 3 out of 4 Minnesota Wild goals via the power play in this one after maybe a little bit of criticism was being heaped down on the power play for lack of scoring. But Wild do get a 4-3 win over Edmonton, pushing their kind of nice win streak to 6 out of 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a nice, lovely 3-day layoff in between games again.
They at least got to come home, so there's that. You at
that's
least
true.
A day
I
at home.
wouldn't, wish upon staying over in Western Canada on anyone.
So I mean that's kind of nice that they actually got a night at home or whatever amidst the historic 7-game road trip they will be covering for the next 2 weeks here. But that game, I don't know. That game to me was just like, I don't want to say it was eye-opening because it's not like I didn't know, but like, holy crap! Without McDavid, the Oilers are just—they're
not good.
They're terrible. Like that penalty kill, and I will give credit to the Wild. I think their power play has maybe gotten a little bit better. I've seen some instances out of them where it's like, oh, it looks like they're actually moving the puck around a little bit, and they're still too cute. Like they still try to move things around, and Granlund being on the half wall still kind of drives me a little bit bonkers when he's on his offhand. But yeah, it seemed like, man, the Oilers could not, like, they couldn't stop a thing, and luckily for them, they have kind of an abundance of offensive talent that like you mentioned that McDavid play, like, Suter can't do anything on that. Nobody can. Like, you just tip your cap because it's freaking Connor McDavid. Like, he's just going to do that. Like, that's what he does.
Way too many people angry at Ryan Suter for being burned by a once in a generational player.
Right? Like, yeah, you get torched by literally the fastest and arguably most talented guy in the NHL, and it's like, what did you think was going to happen when he got him one-on-one?
That's probably why Edmonton is playing Connor McDavid 23-plus minutes a night,
Right.
Because they're not good without him.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And then to close out the week, Saturday night, the Minnesota Wild visited the St. Louis Blues, who had won 2 games in a row entering the contest after they had lost 7 of their first 9. So there maybe was a little bit of hope for the St. Louis Blues, but there was no hope for them in this one, as the Minnesota Wild set on fire the sinking Yos, 5-1.
That team sure did suck last night. They just plain sucked. I've seen teams suck before, but they were the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
Goals from Eric Stahl, Nick Seeler, J.T. Brown, Matt Dumba, and Eric Fear. I'll give the Minnesota Wild the win, and as I threw out on the game recap, the Blues were never in the hockey game, and it probably said more about the Blues that they were never in the hockey game. And then I also kind of put this out there, and I maybe wanted to get your thoughts, but it was very evident from the beginning of the hockey game that Jake Allen had no business being in the goal. He couldn't glove a puck. He could not, put a rebound into a less prominent area than the high danger zones.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, it kind of cried out, struggling goaltender, and then once the Wild got a goal, the Blues were just kind of defeated because it felt like they knew that their goaltender is not going to win this game for them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a goaltender who has zero confidence in the rest of the team, and we can very much attest to this as people who have watched the Minnesota Wild for years and years, you've got no chance. And Mike Yeo might need another mid-season goaltender trade to pull his nuts out of the fire, because there is no good goaltending coming from the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, plain and simple, Jake Allen is ass. I was thinking of that exactly as you were saying it. This Blues team just screams 2014, 2015 Minnesota Wild.
Very good
Jake
in front
Allen,
of the goaltender, not good in the goal.
Jake Allen has serious, Darcy Kemper PTSD syndrome going on right now, where he's just, he lets in one goal that may or may not have been stoppable, and it just absolutely falls apart for him. So it's really been amazing to see how Jake, literally since the last game of this series with the Minnesota Wild in the playoffs, how Jake Allen has just completely unraveled. And, the Blues made a lot of really nice moves this summer, and everyone was kind of like, wow, man, maybe the Blues are going to be pretty legit, but they also lost Carter Hutton, who was having a tremendous year as a backup for him last year, and really kind of, saved their bacon quite a bit, considering Jake Allen was ass last year as well. And, that might have undone everything else they did in the offseason. And they made that nice trade for Ryan O'Reilly, and they acquire some guys, and it just might not matter at all because they let their backup goalie walk. And I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it said a lot more about the Blues than it did the Wild. I'm glad the Wild took advantage because the Wild are notorious for playing down to their competition.
I was going to say, credit to where it's due. The Wild, put their foot on the throat of the Blues and made sure that there was no chance. And the 60 minutes that were played, the St. Louis Blues were in it for 0 seconds. So, again, like I said, more of that's on them, but credit to the Wild for making sure that the Blues never got a sniff of a win in that hockey game.
Yeah.
So, also give me some lottery numbers if you had J.T. Brown, Eric Fear, and Nick Seeler scoring goals in the same game.
We were watching it. I had some friends over last night, so didn't get to quite analyze it as I normally would. But we were watching, and all of a sudden, I'm talking to one of my friends, and my other buddy goes, "Oh, breakaway!" And we turn and look, and the guy scores, and the guy circles around, and it's J.T. Brown. And I'm like, "Wait, what? Like, Where did that come from?
Yeah. Again, give me some lottery numbers if you had J.T. Brown breakaway goal on your Minnesota Wild bingo last night.
No kidding.
So another goal scorer for the Minnesota Wild, as I mentioned before, from the game against St. Louis was Eric Stahl, who had a very nice deflection goal to get the Minnesota Wild on the board, 1-0 early in the first. And that was his 400th career goal in the National Hockey League. So a tip of the cap to Eric Stahl, or a stick tap, as I should say, to be more sport correct here. So I did a little research because FSN put up a graphic when he scored that goal that was his 75th goal for the Minnesota Wild in, I think it was like 177 games.
Wow.
That's just 2 and not even a quarter seasons with the Minnesota Wild. So I did a little research via the great website Hockey Reference that is just a mammoth of information.
Yes.
Or I should say a wealth of information.
Right.
So I ran a search on goals per game in the history of the Minnesota Wild. So from year 1 through present day, those players who have the highest goals per game total in the history of the Minnesota Wild, just to see where Eric Stahl stacks up. And at number 1 is, as expected, Marian Gaborik, who had a .44 goals per game average, 219 goals in 502 games played. Eric Stahl falls second on the list. And to clarify, I also did run a search of a minimum of 100 games, because if you just leave it as at least one game played, Bill McCult of 2003 Minnesota Wild is your leader. So I did add a little filter to this just to make it a little more credible. But
sample sizes, folks.
Yeah, we got to make sure we get the sample sizes right, because otherwise, Wild legend Bill McCult with .67 goals per game or whatever the hell it was. But no, on this list, Eric Stahl fell at number 2 with a .42 goals per game. And he's doing it at the ripe old age of 30, 32, 33, 34.
Ancient.
Marian Gaborik did that in his youthful years. And then third is Brian Rolston at 0.4. And then at number 4, Zach Parise, 0.37.
Sure.
So that...
sounds about right.
You think of... the time Parise's missed, then you think about, when he's been in there, he's been scoring. So, good on him. But that is incredible for, like I said, a guy who is, now in his mid-30s, and he's got, 6 points in his last 4 games. So essentially the last week, he's been on fire. And, he had the incredible season last year, and then the 60-point season his first year. And we talked a little bit about this before the season, but this is a contract year for Eric Stahl. He's in the third out of the 3-year deal that he originally signed, but if this guy keeps putting up points like he has, you almost have to re-sign him, don't you? If you don't, you're just leaving an incredible void down the middle of your lineup. Because with all respect to Mikko Koivu, he's older and, scoring really hasn't been his forte. He's still defensively very well, but you need somebody down the middle to score points. And if Eric Stahl is still scoring, you have to just bring him back, because you really don't have anyone else that can do that.
Yeah, I mean that's going to become the ultimate question, and I think the biggest determining factor on them scoring is what Eric Stahl wants, and because on the open market, I mean, that guy is going to get paid, and he's probably going to get a fair amount of years, even though he's going to be 34. So the question is he willing to accept? Because I got to think the Wild, just kind of looking at where they're at and looking at where their franchise is at, probably don't want to give him a ton of years and probably can't afford to give him a ton of money. So is he willing to essentially take a hometown discount for the team that gave him a chance after his career looked all but over 2 years ago? And I'm thinking probably not. I mean, from his standpoint, what does he care? It's not like he's from here. He might like it here a lot, and hopefully that's enough for him to say, yeah, I'll take a 3-year deal for $5 million a year or something that's a little bit of a discount opposed to what. I mean, he's on the open market. He's probably going to get $6 or $7 million a year, and a 4-year, 5-year deal, something stupid like that, because that's how free agency works now, And so, if he's willing to take the discount, of 3 years or less, or around $5 million or so, then I think they re-sign him. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And you're right. I mean, he's all they have up the middle right now. Really, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's literally the only thing they have up the middle. But any more than that, and it's like, man, then you're getting into some scary territory. Like, giving him anything beyond 3 years, you're starting to pay a 38-year-old. $5 million, and that's if he doesn't take a haircut, and that's if he goes with a $6-7 million deal, then you're paying a 39-year-old $6 or $7 million. And as great as he's been, like that's the kind of stuff that hamstrings your team, for a long time. Like that's the kind of thing that dooms you in the worst way in the NHL. So I don't know. There's been our friend. Tony Abbott at The Athletic wrote an article about it. I think it was his first article with The Athletic about the long-term viability of signing Stahl, and there's probably going to be more on that topic, I think, as the season rolls along and as he continues to perform the way he is. That's going to be the question. That's going to be the question, and it's going to definitely be one of those things where no matter what happens, there's going to be people on either side of the argument, and nobody's going to know what the actual answer should have been until probably 3 years from now.
I'm one of those people who are horribly torn because, like I said, you take him out of the lineup, you're going to have an incredible time trying to replace him, just in terms of scoring. But then again, you look at his age and, the contract that he might demand, and if you're thinking, well, he might take a discount because it's so close to his home, it's like, well, he lives in Thunder Bay, so he still has to, get on a plane to get there.
It's not a short drive.
Right. I'm not going to say, sure, it's a little bit of a shorter flight, but he doesn't just get to, oh, well, it's locker room cleanout day. I just put all my crap in the car and just, drive 20 minutes to, Edina like Zach Parise does.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. I'm almost at the point just where you have to, and I think maybe he would be a little flexible on the dollars if maybe he was looking for maybe something in the 3-year range. But this speaks to more the fact that the Wild have no depth at the center position in their organization, with either people in Iowa or people on the current roster or just prospects that they have drafted. They do not have centers. None are coming, and Joel Eriksson Ek, I don't know what's going on with him, but he's not inspiring a lot of confidence for the long-term outlook of the Minnesota Wild. So I would just say, I think if he can be a little flexible on the dollars, then you have to get a deal done with him despite of his age, just because you don't have anyone coming. So that makes it a pretty easy decision for me. But if you want to try out Joel Eriksson Ek at number 2 center and see how that goes, then sure, why not?
I think an interesting consideration to this whole idea of extending Stahl too is, so his contract is up at the end of this season, at the end of 2019. Then you've got the 2019-2020 season, which you would be signing him for, assuming you're going to sign him.
Lockout.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. So you've got, assuming you sign him to a 3-year deal, you have that lockout looming. Like, and NHL owners are very famous, especially in this town, for signing big contracts, and then the lockout comes and they're like, man, these players are making way too much money.
The staple of every NHL lockout.
We're going to see Craig Leopold literally do that again. He's going to sign Stahl to, hopefully he doesn't sign him to a mega deal. Obviously, like, nothing compares to Parise and Suter anymore, but
NHL revenues are about to, get even that much bigger next year when their new gambling deal with MGM kicks in. But sure, tell me players, make enough money,
right,
or make too much money,
right. So it does add an interesting layer to the whole idea of extending Stahl, because it's like, well, you can try to sign him and whatever, but maybe things change. Maybe there's a salary rollback. Maybe there's new salary cap rules that make things a little more flexible. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Who knows? Every lockout has been, I feel like, considerably unpredictable. You think that things are close and then nothing happens. You think that things are miles apart and then suddenly there's an agreement. It's really tough to predict that kind of stuff ahead of time, but it has to be considered when you're about to sign, a guy in his mid-30s to a multi-year, relatively high AAV deal. Like, that's just something that you have to consider. So, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at. I'm with you where I'm on the fence about it. If you can sign Stahl to a relatively small deal, and everything is relative. So, like you said, 3 years, $5 million or so, similar to what Koivu got with his extension, 2 years, $5.5 million. If you can get him to something like that, that would be amazing. I mean, you as a Wild fan, you would have to love that all day long. Again, I don't know that Eric Stahl is willing to accept something like that. Maybe he is. Maybe he is tickled pink to be here.
We don't know.
Maybe that 12-hour drive to Thunder Bay is a lot better for him, and maybe he just really likes it here, and maybe he likes his team's chances going forward. I don't know why he would, but
maybe he just loves a nice, therapeutic, long car ride.
He's just one of those person that just loves road trips. Maybe he just really likes it here enough to take a deal like that. Beyond that, like, it's, you won the lottery when you signed him the first time. I mean, you literally struck it rich, Jed Clampett style, but
not as rich as the Mega Millions winner, but
close enough. But I mean, doubling down on that, like, that's, it's like that scene in South Park where they win in roulette and then spin the wheel again on the same number. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? So I don't know. It's scary, but it's very interesting. It's very fascinating, to be honest, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. But it's a very, very interesting situation given where the Wild are at, kind of all encompassing.
Speaking of roulette, we're getting that much closer to Giles and the Goalie podcast.
We are
in Vegas.
Yes,
and if you are going, disclaimer, let us know. 'Cause if there's a lot of people going, we certainly would like to meet up with said people.
Sure.
So, who listen to this otherwise fine podcast. So, yell at us if you are making the trek to Vegas in January. Because we will be there and we will be recording on location. So,
we should probably figure out where we're going to record. Like,
I don't know. I kind of like the leaving that open-ended just to see what I come up with on the.
We could always do it in a hotel room, but that's
good luck trying to decipher that one. Apologies to Zone Coverage in advance for the podcast. That I'm sure that'll be something.
Oh yeah.
So the other kind of main topic that we had here was Mikael Granlund now on a 10-game point streak after a pretty rough start to the season, or at least the first 3 games where he was pretty invisible. And now the 10-game point streak, now longest in the National Hockey League, and he leads the Minnesota Wild in points this season with 13 points in 13 games. So essentially in the last 10 games he has 13 points, 6 goals and 7 assists. And I think the more encouraging thing is he's starting to shoot a little bit more. And we saw that in the Edmonton game where he had the winner, and he was given a lot of room to shoot the puck, and I lost my train of thought. It's been a long time since I've had one of those.
It has. That was like a gimmick for a couple of years.
That was a staple for the first few years. But editing the show has, I think, kind of cut down on that, and it's also kind of taught me to, kind of think a little bit differently while we're recording. So, but no, shooting more is good. He's 5th on the Minnesota Wild in shots, behind Dumba, Stahl, Parise, and Zucker. And his shooting percentage of 18.8% is best on the team.
And not sustainable.
And true, but he does have a pretty good shot. So
Sure.
This has to be encouraging to see him shoot a little bit more and maybe help, open up other plays, because Mikael Granlund, for the duration of his career, has pretty much been a pass-first guy, and shooting a little bit more on his end can definitely maybe do a little bit better for the Minnesota Wild down the road here.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a single player on the Wild that couldn't be helped a little bit by shooting more, Like, this whole team could afford to do some more shooting, but it's great to see. It's great to see out of him, and it's interesting that he kind of started off slow and then has really caught fire. But it's just what the Wild need right now. They're not getting contributions from a couple of players that we've talked about. The Ninos and Coyles and Koivus and Eriksson X of the world. But that's what they need right now, and that's what's kind of carried them. Him and Stahl and Parise have certainly done an incredible job propping this team up along with Devan Dubnyk.
Is he the most important player on the Minnesota Wild outside of Devan Dubnyk at this point?
At this very moment,
I mean, I guess you look at this season. Is he the second most important player in the Minnesota? Because you say most important, Devan Dubnyk is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. But you subtract, you take Devan Dubnyk out of the question, and is he the most important player?
Yeah. I'm going to say no. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I think Granlund is very important to this team, but I think that if you look at it, from a most valuable player kind of standpoint, who would hurt the most this team to lose? And Granlund is up there. Don't get me wrong. He's top 5, if not top 3. But I think Eric Stahl is probably ahead of him in that pecking order for the reasons we just talked about, where they have nothing up the middle. And so Eric Stahl gets hurt, and Granlund probably ends up shifting to center, or maybe not. Maybe Coyle does over and over and over again and back and forth, and then ends up at wing, and then ends up at center, and then ends up at wing, and then ends up at center.
Charlie Coyle flip-flops more than a politician this time of year.
But yeah, I think Stahl is slightly more important just because he's the guy that stays at center and plays center, and contributes a lot of production. I think that's very important. Your first line center kind of theoretically should always be the best player in your team, or one of the most important players in your team. And Granlund's producing, but he's a wing, and they have some wings that have some skill, and they could kind of maybe cover up for him a little bit lineup wise. But a center goes down, especially Stahl, and then you're talking Mikko Koivu first line center, second line center, Joel Eriksson Ek or Charlie Coyle or Luke Kunin or Eric Fair. It gets dicey almost instantly. So
I say yes. I think he's the most dynamic player on the Wild roster, and when he goes, as we can attest to this year and previous years, when he goes, the Wild really do go. And unless not last year withstanding, when Eric Stahl literally picked up the team and
right,
took them places. But I just think since he is their most dynamic player, and if he can add the element of shooting and scoring to his very dynamic passing game, then that makes him the most prominent player on the Wild roster, again with the exception of the goaltender.
Mm-hmm.
And having a guy who can do all those things very much helps this team, and just needs to shoot more. He has a pretty good shot. Some of the goals he has scored, not just this year, but in years previous, are very good, and it speaks to that. He does have a good shot. It's just the way he plays is he just looks to pass the puck more, and that is good. The Wild needs somebody on the team with a little more of the shooter's mentality. So getting him to use that good shot, and just taking chances when they're given to you, like he did against Edmonton.
Mhm.
You know, you get that much space and you take that shot. That's a good shot to take, and he scored. So, especially when you're playing against pretty hapless goaltenders, you know, you got to take that shot. So that's how I feel. Eric Stahl is a pretty good one here too.
Yeah.
And, you know, kicking back to our previous topic, but
Well, and we all thought that Ryan Suter was a player that the Wild could afford to lose until we watched the postseason last year. And, we saw how this defense kind of lines up without Ryan Suter. And granted, the Winnipeg Jets exacerbated that to the, most ridiculous degree possible. But, there's a lot of players on this team where if they lose them, they're, you find out really how invaluable, how good that player actually is.
And I think this year there's less of that on Ryan Suter because the defense has played so well. You know, if he were to miss a little bit of time, it's not that big of a loss. I mean, it still is, but not to the degree that maybe we've seen that before. You know, especially last year in the playoffs when once he went down, you're just like, well, we're screwed. And it also didn't help. Jared Spurgeon was, at 60% as he was dealing with an injury. But I think there's less, of Ryan Suter being the most important player on the roster just because of how deep the defense is. So, all right, we can quickly take a look at the week ahead for the Minnesota Wild because I think I missed that last week. I don't think we actually looked ahead. I think I missed that part. But
no, we did. We talked about the Fightin' Yos. Pretty sure we did.
All right, well, maybe I forgot that we forgot about it. Anyway, the Minnesota Wild finished their 7-game road trip this week. They have the remaining 4 games as they visit the San Jose Sharks on Tuesday night, 9:30 start at the Shark Tank, an arena not called Rogers. Then they visit the Los Angeles Kings 2 nights later at Staples Center, another 9:30 local start. And then Friday night, they are in Anaheim at the Arrowhead Pond. Bring that one back against the Anaheim Ducks, for whom I have no animosity for anymore. And then on Sunday afternoon, a 2 o'clock start, which is very good for the Minnesota Wild because the Minnesota Vikings are on a bye week, so they are not going up against the popular team in town.
That's awesome.
They finish a road trip at Enterprise Center against the Fightin' Yos.
Oh, okay.
And
they get to finish the job.
So the question is, will Mike Yeo be needing to call Enterprise to pick him up following that game, or will we not even get to that point? Will Enterprise have already been called to escort him out of Enterprise Center?
He'll get the Gerard Gallant treatment and have to hail his own cab.
No rental car, just get a cab.
Call up Uber. I don't think so. I think Mike Yeo will still be around. I don't think they'll cut bait on him that early. Certainly, things are disappointing, but it's just like when Mike Yeo was here, and granted, in the long run I was wrong about this, but that 14-15 season where they had that terrible midseason swoon right before they traded for Devin Dubnyk, where it was very obvious the problem was goaltending. And don't get me wrong, the Blues aren't playing the surface of the sun and without a goalie behind them, but it's kind of, they're a good enough team up front to where they should be winning more games than they are, and Jake Allen is literally ruining it for them. So, and there's lots of stats to back that up, tons of stats that back that up. So, I don't think it's on Mike Yeo. If they fire Mike Yeo, then Doug Armstrong probably isn't very far behind him. I think he'll still be there come Sunday, but very interesting road trip. Every time you go to California, there's obviously enough talent out there that you get the first look at Erik Karlsson as a Shark.
Exciting.
Yeah, and you get to see the hapless Kings again. Hopefully they're still having their goaltending issues as well, and the complete opposite end of the spectrum in Anaheim, where John Gibson is as good as me and you thought he was before the playoffs last year.
We're a very pro John Gibson podcast.
And but the team in front of him is playing like Jake Allen. So it's very opposite ends of the spectrum with the Blues and the Ducks. But It should be interesting to see. It should be interesting to see if they can pick up some points on that road trip. It's always a tough road trip going out west. But, it's always kind of a fun to see how you stack up against those Pacific Division monsters, too.
And those aren't necessarily places that the Wild have fared well.
No, exactly.
Particularly San Jose and Anaheim. Pretty House of Horror kind of stuff for the Minnesota Wild. So will be fascinating to see, especially since they're on their winning ways of 7 out of their last 8 heading into the remainder of this road trip. So moving on to our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this. If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
The Bruce Boudreau quote of the week coming in the wake of the 5-1 win over the St. Louis Blues. And this quote comes from via Michael Russo of The Athletic, but Bruce Boudreau commented on Nick Seeler's 1-goal, 2-assist game against the Blues. And then he gets in a little more specifically about the depth of defense, but he said, quote, "I just told Seeler I'll be expecting that more often now," meaning his his 3 points. That was a pretty good game. 3 points and a +4, and Greg Pateryn a +5. When you get that out of your 5th, 6th D, it shows balance and what we've been trying to preach all year long. So I had no idea until I saw that quote that Greg Pateryn was a +5. And again, speaks. I think that speaks. As good as that is, I think it just speaks more that the Blues were just god awful, and it just did not take much for them to get pushed off a puck or lose a puck battle. In addition to their poorest goaltending, but
also it speaks a little bit to the silliness of the +- stat.
True.
It's like just was
good.
Greg Pateryn the best defenseman on the ice that night? Good. I don't know that he was. But not to say he had a bad game. He obviously had a good game.
Could have been good on the blue line that night against the Blues. Right. Let's be honest.
But no, to your point, I mean, great on Greg Pateryn. We talked about it last week, where the one of the biggest differences between this team and last season's team is that you actually have a third pairing that isn't awful. After the Wild fired Kyle Quincy into the sun, deservedly, it's been a lot better in that regard. So that's good.
Kyle Quincy was fired towards the sun, and then he, like in Star Trek 4, did a slingshot around the sun and landed in Finland.
Which happens all the time.
Although he just didn't travel back into time like they did into Star Trek 4.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, I have Star Trek on my brain today. I went to a Star Trek podcast that was touring here last night, so it's just all those references are in my head here.
Did you show up with arms wide?
I did. But I've had great restraint to not drop more of those here in the first 40 plus minutes.
I got nothing wrong with some next generation drops here and there. I think everyone who grew up around our age should be a big fan of said program.
All right, that was the Bruce Boudreau quote of the week, and now we will move to our Kirill Watch.
Kaprizov across the Gusev. Kaprizov shoots. He scores! He scores! The Russians are golden in South Korea.
So Kirill Kaprizov was in the news for Minnesota Wild fans here towards the end of the week, as Paul Fenton disclosed that he was flying out to Russia to watch and get a meeting with Kirill Kaprizov.
Woo!
Craig Leopold was also supposed to be part of the delegation that was going out, but he did not, just due to some hip problems that still exist on his part.
Really?
So he had to remain behind, but Paul Fenton heading over to watch some CSKA games, and then as Kaprizov's agent told The Athletic, the meeting was only expected to be for just a couple of minutes, because apparently that was all that could be afforded to the Wild general manager. So I have
Russia
questions here.
Never change Russia.
I have questions here. Like, Are the Wild like getting like hardballed big time by, not just the KHL but by Kaprizov's agent? Because I feel like in other players who have expressed interest in coming into the NHL, the general managers who want them to come over here seemingly have gotten maybe more than a few minutes to talk to the player.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. There's a part of me that just feel like the Wild have gotten played here with Kaprizov, and probably more of that had to do with his previous agent, who, was not good about getting messages through to the player.
Apparently.
But now that Kaprizov signed with Dan Milstein, who does represent a number of prominent NHL players, so that's at least one encouraging sign that Kaprizov might actually come over here. But
right.
Just a couple of minutes.
I think, and to your point, Milstein is his North American agent.
Correct.
And this other guy is his Russian agent, and his Russian agent is about to lose, one of his top clients in 2 seasons when his contract in the KHL is up. I mean, you would think, regardless of what happens with the Wild. So of course his Russian agent is being a dick about it. Like, he's about to lose a really good client like that.
I mean,
why would you encourage that at all? Because the sooner Kaprizov leaves, the sooner, the money train stops for. I mean, I'm sure he's got other clients, but like, you don't want to lose one of your top guys.
He'll still get a few rubles from him because he'll still have him on in case he wants to come back to the KHL like many players. It just, I don't know. I feel like on both, the Wild's part and, on the player/agent's part, it's just been a terrible mess. But it's just a few minutes. Like, I don't even think Kaprizov ever got his draft jersey when, Chuck Fletcher got over there to see him once, and that was just last year. But
they shipped it to him, and his agent burned it or something.
Yeah. Either that, or he just sold it for some more rubles.
It's on eBay, the Russian equivalent of eBay.
Right, so that's kind of our Kaprizov news for this week. So hopefully, a lot of encouraging things come from Paul Fenton's meeting with Kaprizov, even if it is just for a couple of minutes. And if hopefully it goes well, maybe Fenton just adopts the Lou Lamoriello plan he did 30 years ago with the New Jersey Devils for smuggling players out of Russia, like Vyacheslav Fedosov.
Right.
Just get him out somehow. Just smuggle him out. I don't care if there's no buyout clause in his KHL contract. That's what I tweeted.
Yeah.
So smuggle him out.
Yeah, it's weird to me, like this whole situation where Kaprizov's 21 now. It's not like he's a teenager anymore, and he's obviously shown at the highest level that he can play with these guys. And he's making a decent salary in the KHL. I believe he's making somewhere around the equivalent of about $2.5 million a year, something like that. So not bad. But obviously there's a lot more money to be had in the NHL. So I don't know. It's interesting, the whole fact that there's no buyout in his contract. Like, you can make so many jokes about Russian corruption with this whole situation. Like, what kind of agent doesn't put any kind of buyout into a contract where a guy very obviously could want to leave at some point? Well, an agent that doesn't want to lose his client. Right. So like he's just been like this agent is just jobbing him and the Wild, in the same by the same token. And so it doesn't really surprise me all the BS that's going on, and the fact that he's on a team that Putin supposedly really is got a vested interest in and all that jazz. None of it is all that surprising, but it is good. It is great that Fenton is over there, at least opening up communication and meeting him in person, that kind of thing. If he can do that, let's say once or twice a season for the next 2 seasons here while his contract rides out, then the Wild have a decent chance of retaining him, having his rights and all that kind of stuff when he actually does decide to come here. So
just exchange phone numbers. Just keep the line of communication open. Just keep telling him.
Right. Just slip Kirill a card with your personal number on it, and
just keep telling him.
Make sure the agent's not involved.
You love him and want to pay him all the money. When he comes over. Just do whatever.
You get all sorts of endorsement deals with like Land O'Lakes and Target, and let's see
Target.
what else. Target and Maybe Best Buy. I don't know.
Quick Trip.
Yes, Quick Trip. Yes, can't forget Quick Trip.
They've had a canned commercial for a few years. Maybe they need a new spokesperson.
They need to shoot for that Russian angle.
Yeah, there you go.
All the Russian immigrants in Minnesota.
I tried to do the healthy salads for my family in a Russian accent, and just even in my head it sounded terrible. So
it's going to sound like Chekhov from from the original Star Trek.
Well, I know Russian vodka and Quick Trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, that was bad.
Yeah, that's
anyway,
okay
though. Ben, do you have another prospect that you would like to update?
I do. So my prospect watch this week, it's a special. It's very special, Giles. This week is a celebration. It is a celebration.
Why are we celebrating?
Because Philippe Johansson, the number 1 pick this year of the Wild, number 18 pick, finally registered his first point of the season after 14 games with 14 games with what's the team name again? Legsand IF.
Well, this calls for a celebration. I will.
So after 14 games in the second level, mind you, the second level of Swedish hockey, Philippe Johansson finally registered an assist, which was his first point of the season.
This calls for a celebration.
Of course, we do all this in jest. We, amongst every other Wild fan with a brain, are fairly disappointed with that draft pick, and it's not really looking like it's I don't know, maybe when Johansson is on the ice, his team has never once been scored on. Maybe that's happening. I don't know. I don't think that those kind of comprehensive stats are available for what is basically Sweden's AHL, but maybe that's the case. Maybe there's a silver lining to this. But anyway, 1 point out of Philippe Johansson so far on this young season in 14 games.
Woo.
And hopefully he scores many more points besides just that one.
So to our Central Intelligence briefing.
Central Intelligence.
Yeah, I've been scoreboard watching since opening night. So I don't know if that counts or anything, but I think hockey players are hockey players, and they want to see where they are, and they know how close everything is. They know that every game is vital.
We find the Minnesota Wild in second place in the Central Division, behind the Nashville Predators.
Actually tied for 4th most points in the league.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when you win 7 out of 8 games.
It snuck up on me.
After kind of a so-so start, but Minnesota Wild in 18 points at second in the Central Division behind the Nashville Predators with 22 points, and the Winnipeg Jets and Colorado Avalanche tied 17 points. Dallas Stars at 16, Chicago Blackhawks at 15. They have lost 5 in a row.
Whew.
After a promising start and Corey Crawford returning, Chicago Blackhawks
he apparently has a lot of rust to shake off.
Yeah, went into a nosedive, and then you find the St. Louis Blues, who are
they were the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
Very close to being sunk here, but that's a kind of look at the Central Division. The Predators just kind of holding their ground, and the Jets did a back-to-back over in Finland this past week for the Global Series with the Florida Panthers. Patrick Laine getting showcased in his native land.
The hat trick in the first game, I believe.
Good for him. Good for the league, and that also kind of tied into a talking point I had. But the NHL, according to Sports Business Daily, and their focus on growth of the game in Europe, kind of tied into their global series that they're going to carry on with next year. The NHL has adjusted some weekend start times. Some 50 games have been adjusted to start early in the afternoon, so that games can be seen over in Europe, and more teams that have more prominent, European players part of that. And the Wild, I think, only have like one or two of those games. One of which is on December 15th against Calgary, a 12:30 p.m. Central start for a home game.
That's even earlier than I thought. I thought they were doing like the 2 p.m. kind of deal.
And I think we've and then they also have one January 5th against Ottawa, 12 p.m. start. That's also a Saturday. Just rolling through. That is not December. February 9th, noon start at New Jersey. And I think that's kind of it. Kind of outside some Sunday matinees that we've previously seen. But
Sure.
Do you like this move? And I'm not just talking because I love the fact that the game is played early in the afternoon and then it's over and done with, and I still have a Saturday night to go out and do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah, well, Serious Mashup has to be ecstatic about this, even though he'll tell you any wild marquee game or any wild matinee game that he gets to watch is the kiss of death for the team. But,
yeah, it is.
But anyway, I think it's good. I think any kind of growth they can do in Europe is good. Obviously, a lot of stars come from Europe. It's like I know that other leagues are trying to cater to other countries and whatnot, but the NHL is a very unique situation where most of their players are foreign. And we're getting to the point now where a very, very strong percentage. They're not to 50% or anything yet, but I'd say a third of the league probably is from Europe. In that range, a third roughly, a third to half, somewhere in there. And so, I mean, that's pretty considerable, and that's something where you do want to cater to that a little bit. And I don't think that it hurts the local situation. As you said, I kind of do enjoy when they play an afternoon game. And you go about your day. It's like afternoon baseball on a Saturday. It's fantastic. Right. I mean, it's just. So I'm totally fine with it. I think it's I wouldn't go as strong as to say it's a win-win and everyone should love it or anything like that, because Saturday night games are a good time, and I'm not going to say they're not. But a Saturday afternoon game can be a good time too, and then like you said, you freed up your whole night to go out and do other things. Especially for people who have season tickets, or people like us who cover the team, or situations like that where you're, for lack of a better word, you're obligated to watch the games, right. Or you really do want to watch the games, but you still want to have a life every Saturday night at the same time. So I do think it's good.
All right, last but not least, on to jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
All right, so our jersey topic this week is Original Six jerseys.
Yes.
Because nothing gets the old time people excited than saying Original Six. Gets them warm and tingly. So, Ben, what are we grading on here?
Well, we talked about other jerseys. We talked about basketball. We talked about, some other things, and kind of went with the best and the worst. But with the Original Six, and I'm sure you feel this way as well, I think they're all good.
Yep.
I think they're all very good. And so for me, what I thought of is instead of doing a 3 best, 3 worst, just kind of rank them. Rank kind of how, at the time of the Original Six, so anywhere leading up to 1966, essentially. Most of their jerseys hadn't changed much. There was really goofy beginnings for every team. There was when the Blackhawks were black and white and didn't have the crest, and the Canadians wearing tan pants and stuff like that. That stuff doesn't really count.
Right, that's the body of work.
Right, but it's more of by the time the Original Six, the last year of the Original Six, the teams that had similar jerseys or kind of at least a common look for quite a while at that point, somewhere in the range of 20 years. So rank them basically. What is let's start it. Let's go all the way on down. So what is your number 6? What is
Boston?
Really? You think that's the least beautiful of the Original Six?
Correct. It took Boston a long time. to get their jersey until like the Ray Bork era.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I actually had Boston as my number 6 team as well, so I'm with you on that. And actually, you know, for many years there, Boston only had a primary yellow jersey. They weren't using black a whole lot, which is weird to think of now.
Yeah.
You know. And then after the class of '67 came, actually that's when they made the switch to the black jerseys predominantly. So no, I'm with you on that. I think Boston they were my number 6 as well. My number 5 was actually the Maple Leafs. Again, good jerseys, and I think the Maple Leafs have good jerseys. But you know they kind of bounced around a little bit with the Maple Leaf, and right around that time again is when they switched to the Canadian flag looking Maple Leaf. Right around that time is when they won their last Stanley Cup.
Right.
So I don't know. It just the logo is very simple in both instances. Not a bad logo, but just kind of a very simple logo, and something that, the jersey didn't really do a ton for me, I guess. There's a lot of striping and a lot of weird striping they've kind of bounced around a lot with. So I had them as number 5. Who was your number 5?
I'm inclined to agree.
Mm-hmm.
The Maple Leafs. You know what? No, I'm gonna bump the Maple Leafs to 4.
Okay.
I got the Blackhawks at 5.
What?
Just because they had some weird stuff going on that I'm not a fan of. Like, they figured it out in the mid '50s that with their now iconic look, but kind of prior to that, they had a good solid 20 years of just the red stripes with the black on the home uniform, and
right.
It's too much. So Blackhawks at 5, and then I'll put the Maple Leafs at 4, just kind of on the same grounds that you did.
Well, see, I was thinking about it more in the realm of their jerseys, kind of, I don't know. I wasn't thinking of their way back jerseys, like I was saying. So I wasn't thinking of the red and black and that kind of stuff. So I had the Blackhawks much higher, but
well, whatever. Somebody's got to be down there. So.
Right, and it's tough. And to your point, so the next team I have on my list, you'll definitely disagree with. I have the Rangers at number 4.
Yeah.
And I know you love that look, and I'm I like it too. Again, well, these jerseys are fantastic, but I like the Rangers just a tiny bit less than the rest of the teams, and in the original 6 at least, where I think it's a good look, and I think it's a unique look at that, especially at that time. But so I had them at 4 actually. So
and sadly, I have the Rangers at 3.
Sure.
After Toronto, they're at 4.
Mm-hmm.
Again, their look is iconic, and I'm all here for it. But given the other 2 teams up above them on this list, and
right.
their, kind of their body of work with jerseys leading up to the expansion of '67.
Yeah.
The Rangers fall in at 3 for me.
Yeah, I had the Red Wings at 3. It's because that logo is obviously incredible, and it's really stood the test of time, which is one of the more impressive things about it, where you can have a logo that's that detailed, and it doesn't look dated to this day. Like, it doesn't look like it was. I mean, when did they start using that? Christ, it was probably had to be in the 40s. They started using a version of it in 1932. And that version did look a little bit wonky. It was a little more short and stout. What they really started using, a little bit longer, looks like around maybe 1982. It got a lot bigger, but it's basically the same logo. Yeah, from 1932 to 82. It was just a little bit smaller, I guess, so it wasn't that short and stout. Okay, so 1949, it changed slightly, but it's just an incredible logo. Like, for a logo that was essentially designed in 1932, refined in 1948, that's just incredible that logo looks as modern as it does. Like, it looks like it's exactly conveying what they want to convey. With Detroit being the Motor City and all that jazz, it's just really, really impressive how much that logo has really stood up, and how beautiful it really has stayed this many years later.
And so, I have Detroit at 2.
Sure.
And then it's pretty obvious who number 1 is. And I think you'll probably go with me on number 1, unless you're you're gonna slide Chicago in.
Yeah, I actually did. I have the Habs second, and the Canadians. We both have talked about our love for the Canadians jerseys, and yeah, I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to say nostalgia to, maybe a little bit of respect to it, just because the history of that team, the history of that look. So they're given a little bit of credit, maybe where where it's a simple jersey with a simple look, but just the sheer history of it is something that kind of commands its own respect and makes the jersey better than it would be if it was on a different franchise. But you really can't go wrong. I was it was hard for me going back and forth. I did end up going with the Blackhawks. Like I said, you're right, they did have some weird stuff going on in the early years, but from the 50s on, they settled on what is essentially their current jersey right now, and that logo is just absolutely beautiful, and I think it's a really good look, and so I do have the Blackhawks as my top original 6 jersey, but I'm not saying you're wrong in the least by putting the Canadians number 1, because I think that's a very, very very easy way to go with that.
And credit really to all these teams, maybe with the exception of Toronto, for kind of holding with these looks, through the 80s and 90s when, jerseys kind of got to be a little bit busy.
Yeah.
Or, at least the looks did. And, never steering away from what was good. And, credit to them for sticking with it. And, Toronto, to their credit, like, they might have changed up a little bit, but still very good look on their end. So... just nice to see that they, kind of stuck with their original look throughout the years. So good on them. And hey, if you have opinions on your original 6 rankings, tell us. We have a Facebook you can yap at us on. We've got a Twitter account you can yap at us at about. We like to hear back from you. So facebook.com/GATGWildPodcast or our Twitter handle @GATGWildPodcast. Let us know. We like your feedback. Sort of. That can wrap it up since we're going a little bit over our hour here. So we will chime back at you next week after a full slate of Minnesota Wild games, so probably plenty to talk about. But you can find Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, and like I said, the podcast Twitter account, and then our Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel where we put those pre- and post-game videos. I also had a video this week where I gave my 3 stars of the month of October.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit controversial since a prominent player was left off the list. No, not Devin Dubnyk. So give that a look. Just YouTube search Giles and the Goalie. You will find the channel. Our otherwise fine podcast is on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio. A lot of good stuff there. So do subscribe, tell your friends, share on whatever social media you have. Word of mouth helps. So that's what I'll say. That also we do contribute to our website called Zone Coverage, Zone Coverage Podcast Network, zonecoverage.com for all your Minnesota sports needs. So do give that a look as well. And then with that said, Ben and I will be back next week, so we will chat with you later.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.